This is Katrin with Disability Rights New York. Welcome to our podcast, Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned. We are here to bring you information on the most relevant topics regarding disability rights and advocacy. Today, we welcome DRNY's PAAT, PATBI, and PAVA Director, Christy Asbee, and she's joined by Helen Hellmuth, Senior PAVA Advocate. We're going to discuss your voting options when submitting your ballot for an election in New York State. Christy and Helen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So Christy, talk to us a little bit about the first steps for someone who's planning on casting their vote for an upcoming election. What options are available to them when they're casting their vote?
The first step and the most practical step is to make sure that you are, in fact, a registered voter with your current voting address, the address where you currently reside. If you have recently moved or if you have moved since you have voted last, then you want to make sure that you are registered to vote where you currently live. You can check the voter registration status online. It's really easy, and we'll drop the link for you in the comments. Also, you want to consider whether or not you want to vote in person or vote by absentee ballot. There are deadlines that you have to comply with in order to get an absentee ballot if that's the direction that you want to go. So, for example, if you want to vote in this upcoming election by absentee ballot, you need to request your absentee ballot to your County Board of Elections office 15 days before the general election date.
And Christy, with requesting your absentee ballot, is that something that you need to do in person? Is that something that you can do online? Can you mail in that request? What are the options there?
It's best to go onto the website of your County Board of Elections or call them to see how they are accepting absentee ballot requests. There is some difference among county boards of elections in how they are processing the absentee ballot requests. The standard would be to request by mail or going into your County Board of Elections office and making that request. Although Helen can fill us in a little bit more on what we can do in the COVID era of voting.
Yes, so the State Board of Elections website has a absentee ballot request portal where you can go on and provide your county, your name, your date of birth, your zip code, and you can request an absentee ballot online through that portal system. The deadline to do so is by the 18th of October. And if you choose to request an absentee ballot by going into your County Board of Elections office in person, you have until November 1st to do so.
And Christy, what's interesting about that is we just spoke to Jennifer Wilson from the League of Women Voters in New York, and there's a provision on the ballot this year to actually address the absentee ballots. Talk to us a little bit about what that means.
Yes, there's a constitutional amendment on the ballot for November's ballot that is a statewide question for all voters as to whether we should eliminate the excuse-only absentee ballot so that everybody can have access to the absentee ballot voting program. Right now, it is limited in our Constitution to excuse only, and the excuses allowed are if you are out of town on election day, or if you have a disability that prevents you from going into the polling location.
And so, Helen, as we're talking about the absentee ballot and even the new proposal, our audience members, I'm sure, are thinking about this election, November of 2021. What has changed about that? As we talked a little bit about COVID gave everyone the opportunity to request an absentee ballot. Is that still the case for this upcoming election?
Yes, that is still the case for this election. All voters are able to vote via absentee ballot through January 2022 under the temporary illness provision. And if the first time you used an absentee ballot was during the June 2020 election using this temporary illness provision, then you must re-request an absentee ballot. As I'd already mentioned, you can request a ballot online through the State Board of Elections website portal.
And so another thing that we saw through COVID was early voting access. Christy, talk to us a little bit about what that means for voters in New York State for this upcoming election.
We have 9 days of early voting. They start 10 days prior to the election. They go for 9 days straight. There is a break on Monday, the day before Election Day, and then polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Election Day. Early voting is a great way to vote, to cast your vote. You can hopefully bypass some of the busyness at your polling location on Election Day by going to early voting. What you need to know, though, is that your early voting polling location may be different from your assigned polling location on Election Day. So across the state, talking about all of New York State except for New York City, every county has to have a certain number of early voting polling locations. They are, by state law, located in specific areas designated by the County Board of Elections office. They may change every election. They may change mid-election, quite frankly, if there are some problems that lead to litigation and lead to immediate changes. So to stay up to date with where your early voting polling location is incredibly important, because you don't want to go to a site that has been changed from the last election or from the previous day, quite frankly. So it's just important to look to your County Board of Elections website for updates. Now, specifically relating to voters in New York City, voters in New York City are still being assigned their early voting polling locations. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not this is right, whether it's wrong, whether it should be changed immediately. But right now, what we're talking about is if you are a New York City voter, you have one assigned early voting polling location, and it may or may not be the same polling location as you are assigned to go to on Election Day. So it's just incredibly important to find out where your early voting polling location is. And you can do that on New York City Board of Elections website.
And again, we'll drop those sites in the description of the podcast. And so let's move on to polling sites. Helen, talk to us a little bit about accessibility of the polling places. Each year, DRNY goes out and we assess polling places for accessibility. Talk to us about what that means, what the requirements are, and how it is that it affects those of us who are trying to get out and vote on Election Day or on early voting days.
All polling places assigned in New York State are required to be physically accessible and meet the ADA accessibility guidelines for physical accessibility. Unfortunately, that is not always the case, but what an accessible polling place looks like is having accessible parking spaces with proper signage and access aisles next to them. So if someone needs to transfer out of their vehicle into a mobility device, it means having solid pavement on the ground and not having gravel or rocky, unsturdy surfaces. It means having curb cuts and ramps where appropriate, and at making sure that the ramps are not too steep and that they have proper edge protections. It means having a clear path of travel through the actual polling place itself. And if you are ever in a situation where you're at a polling place and it doesn't appear to be physically accessible, snap a photo and contact DRNY, and it's something that we can certainly investigate and see if it requires any follow-up with the County Board of Elections office.
And as we're talking about the polling places, let's talk about the BMDs, the ballot marking devices that are available and should be working at each polling place. Helen, if you want to continue and talk to us about what a BMD is, how it should be accessible to you, and what do we do if there are any issues with the BMD at your polling place?
Yeah, so every polling place, that means during early voting and on election day, must have an accessible voting machine, which is also known as the ballot marking device or the BMD. And it is a machine that allows voters to privately and independently mark their ballot using a variety of accessibility features, such as having the ballot read to you through headphones, a Braille keypad, two-switch paddle, and sip and puff device that allows voters to independently maneuver and mark their ballot. Now, the BMD only marks the ballot and does not cast it. So once the voter has made their candidate selections, the BMD will then print the ballot and the voter will put it in the scanner to be counted. All voters are able to use the BMD regardless of whether or not they have a disability. And I always encourage voters to use the BMD at their polling place. It makes sure that the machines are working. It shows the poll workers in the County Board of Elections that these BMDs are important and voters need them. And so they need to be in working order. If a voter doesn't want to use a ballot marking device, but still needs assistance with marking their ballot, they can bring any person they trust besides their boss or union representative to help them mark their ballot. This can be a parent, a child over the age of 18, or a friend. And the last thing is also voters can get assistance marking their ballot from a poll workers. So if you arrive at the polls on election day and realize that you're going to need help filling out your ballot, but you didn't bring anyone, and for whatever reason you don't feel comfortable using the BMD, you can always ask a poll worker for assistance.
And Christy, Helen just brought up a good point. She talked about an independent vote. So will you just talk to our audience a little bit about what that means for someone to have an independent vote at the polling place?
This is a concept that is really rooted, I think, inherently in our voting program, but in having a secret vote. But it's also inherent under the ADA to have equal access. And so because the idea of our voting program, especially in New York State, is that people vote entirely privately or as privately as possible or as privately as they want to vote. And then also independently, so they can do it themselves. They can use the tools that you need to mark the ballot with independence without any assistance from other people. This is a fundamental part of our voting program. But for some people, it's just not possible. But people who have physical disabilities or people who have print disabilities, a totally private and independent vote is not possible with the systems we have in place in New York State at the moment.
And a private and independent vote is guaranteed under the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA. So if you ever experience a barrier to a private independent vote, you have the right to file a HAVA administrative complaint. And that allows you to address the barriers that you experience to a private and independent vote on record in front of the State Board of Elections office. And they then hold the County Board of Elections office accountable for those barriers that you experienced and require them to make changes to the voting program so that you don't experience those barriers in the future.
Christy and Helen, it's just a little more than 4 weeks away is our election day, which is always very exciting as we get ready to, as not just a state, but a nation, get to cast our votes. Thank you so much for all of the information that you shared with us today. If either of you have any resources that our audience members may need, if they have questions about their voting options, Christy, let's start with you. If there are resources available, what are they? And certainly we'll drop the links in the description, but talk to us a little bit about what they are.
The PAVA team at Disability Rights New York has created quite a few resources about the voting process and how to to do what you need to do to go to the polls and vote with as much privacy and independence as possible. So definitely check out the resources that DRNY has already created. And then, of course, League of Women Voters has a lot of information about the statewide ballot proposals that will be on everybody's ballot across the state this November. And then there's also a lot of county and city initiatives on ballots this year. My new mantra is no year is an off year. So this year is just as important as our presidential election was last year because it impacts your community, the measures on the ballot, the things that you're voting for. If your community is having an election this year, which it will be because there are ballot proposals across the state, it is just imperative that we engage in all elections because even your county, I should say, especially your county and your city or town elected officials, they're making decisions that impact your life. And the ballot initiatives are impacting your life as well. So get out there and vote.
Christy pretty much hit everything. The only other couple things I will add is ballotpedia.org is a great resource for finding nonpartisan information about ballot proposals. So if you read the League of Women Voters Ballot Proposal Guide and you're looking for more, ballotpedia.org is a great place to look. And another important thing, which I didn't realize until a little later in my voting life, it's important to know what's on the ballot and what you're voting for before you get to the polls. And you can find that out by going to your County Board of Elections website and getting a sample ballot. So you can see what races are happening, who's running, and then you can do your own independent research to figure out who it is that you are going to vote for. No one should be going into election day and then surprised based on what they see on their ballot. You should know ahead of time. It's good to know ahead of time who you're going to vote for.
Christy and Helen, it's always a pleasure talking with both of you. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned has been brought to you by Disability Rights New York, your source for disability rights and advocacy. If you enjoyed our program, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this post. If there is a subject you would like us to discuss, please email podcast@drny.org or comment below. Tune in next Wednesday, where we'll bring you more information on disability rights in the state of New York. The closed captioned and ASL version of this podcast is available on our YouTube channel. To listen to more Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.